Hey everyone! I'm back with another Blue Protocol Star Resonance video. This time just offering my thoughts and impressions of playing the closed beta test of the global version of the game. I'm not gonna go hard on the editing here. It'll just be me yapping about most of what the game has to offer, and doing that over some footage of the closing of the beta, with some fireworks. If you don't mind that, then let's get to it. Overall, I clocked in somewhere over 100 hours playing. I know some people are going to say, them's rookie numbers, but to give you some perspective, I'm getting a little old, and I can't devote all my time and energy into gaming like I used to. So accounting for real-life responsibilities and having a healthy gaming diet, meaning I play other games as well, I'd say more than 100 hours is more than a sufficient amount of time to get a grasp on most of the game. So, bearing that in mind, I will likely be a mid-core player, leaning on the casual side when this game comes out. So, as you might know, the beta had started in mid-August, and got extended all the way to September 7th. Almost 3 weeks. Honestly, that's really long for a beta. It felt too long. I spent my time leveling my soul musician, building her, absorbing the story. Yes, I'm one of the rare few that actually paid attention to the story. We'll get to that eventually. I did a lot of exploring, checking out the town and the open world, doing dailies, quests, dungeons, world bosses, and social activities. I was not able to take a look at all the content due to just feeling the need to slow down and save that energy for the official release of the game. I don't want to get burned out. And there's a lot to cover. I have thoughts, I have praises, and I have concerns. So to start things off, I think the character customization is good. I already made a video showcasing that, so I don't need to repeat everything here, but I will say, it is robust enough to really let you get creative and come up with some really nice looking characters. I've seen lots of cool designs from other players. I've seen basic designs, I've seen meticulously very well done designs, and even some really obnoxious designs. But hey, that's what happens when you have an extensive character creator. It may not be as amazing as a Korean MMO creator, but considering most MMOs, it gets the job done. What I will say though is that it lacks voices. When I was done making my character and I came out of the inn, jumping around, I was not really expecting my character to sound so aloof and bubbly. Completely different than the vibe I was going for. I wanted cool, sexy rocker chick, but instead I got a sort of generic anime girl voice. So having more voices would really benefit the game. People want to relate more to their characters, and voices can be a big deal to some. The game has a solid starter experience, but it's not perfect. This being an Eastern game, it is prone to somewhat extensive dialogue and story scenarios. You are thrown into the action early, but not after some exposition. Now, thankfully, there is a skip button. I don't use it, but it's great that it's there, and I'm sure most people use it. The game eases you in with all its features and class skills, slowly giving you access to all its systems as you progress, being careful not to overwhelm the player. But what is overwhelming is the UI and the amount of navigation you have to go through in order to find what you need. Sometimes some things are located in the weirdest of pages. Your potential skills are in a weird spot. Your Terra Resonance skills are separated and located elsewhere. The UI is quite bizarre. And let's not mention the good old overwhelming amount of notifications you get throughout your UI. If you're not already a gacha gamer, this is gonna feel somewhat annoying. And all this will probably take some time to get used to. Seriously though, we need a claim all button, or a clear all notifications button. We really do. If you're worried about a lack of complexity in the game, since it is partially a mobile game, I will say this. Yes, there's a handful of skills to work with. The combat is very simple. However, the complexity comes from several things. First, the build craft, meaning your talent trees, your gear, your stat allocation, and also from the encounter design. Final Fantasy XIV players rejoice, because the encounters in this game is very inspired by Final Fantasy XIV. If you're not a fan of the dance, the kind that Final Fantasy XIV encounter design is known for, and you're more of a fan of the brawly and scrappy nature of World of Warcraft or Guild Wars, then this is likely not for you. To rewind a little bit, I am personally glad that there's not a lot of buttons to press, because that means less time staring at buttons on cooldown and more time focusing on the action going on screen. For me, it's a lot more fun and a lot more dynamic. That's me. Different gameplay satisfies the needs of different people, after all. Now, there are talent trees, and there is buildcraft, like I mentioned. But as usual, the meta will be figured out, and soon everyone will just use copy pasta, the same cookie cutter builds. It's no Path of Exile or Guild Wars 2. It is what it is. But I prefer to have a system like this than having no build crafting at all. Gearing up can get grindy. You'll be getting on the treadmill quite often. But there are gear pity systems in place that let you obtain gear at what I think is a reasonable rate. You get personal gear for first clears, and there are other avenues for gear acquisition, like world bosses. Grinding dungeons and salvaging unwanted gear lets you accumulate a resource that lets you directly get some purple quality gear. You have options, and once you gear a class, you'll likely have leftovers to help you gear another one. Some people out there might discourage you from trying other classes because on the surface it seems like it would be an absolute pain in the ass. I don't think it is. I really don't. I believe some people are just thinking about short-term gains and not the long term, not looking at the bigger picture. It may be a little time consuming, but eventually you'll be able to at least round up a decent starter set for another class, and from there, do the grind for the gold gear all over again. But I suppose it just depends on what you want from the game. If you're a sweaty player, then I can see this being more detrimental to your time and progress. Not for me, however. Housing. It is very much a work in progress. The UI and systems need a lot of work. It's clear that it's in its early alpha stages. Not much to say on that because I barely engaged with it. Right now, the housing system and tools are very bare bones. My hope is that they expand on that, let a lot more people visit your house, and also provide some kind of directory that people can browse. Maybe cultivate a nice and social RP ecosystem. Here's hoping, because that's one of the few things that I really enjoyed back in other games. I'll probably just find a roommate to decorate for me. I'm not the world's best or creative decorator, unfortunately. Dungeons. Dungeons are great. I am happy to report that dungeons are great. Very short though, but I don't hate that they're short. 5 to 10 minutes, you're in and you're out. One boss. Little amount of mob grinding. But the advantage to this, though, is that the dungeons feel more fleshed out. Mobs have encounter design. They're not just brainless groups designed to be mowed down with AoEs. It doesn't feel as monotonous. And the dungeon bosses feel more like trial bosses from Final Fantasy XIV, or strike bosses from Guild Wars 2. The dungeons feel really good to repeat simply because they're fun, especially on the higher difficulty levels. And the best part about that is, instead of simply amping up the damage and health numbers, they also ramp up the mechanical complexity of all the fights. A hard mode boss has more mechanics than a normal mode and easy mode. Now, my experience might be beta test only, but unfortunately, I found the matchmaking wait times to be absolutely brutal, even as a healer. Tanks have it a lot easier. Tanks are always needed, but for some reason, as a healer, I was waiting almost as long as a DPS. I really hope this is just because beta testers slow down or I just wasn't playing during prime time. But if it's not, I strongly suggest using World Chat to look for groups, or finding a guild or friends to play with. We'll have to wait and see if matchmaking improves on official release, when a lot more have access to the game. Speaking of which, this game heavily incentivizes you to be social. You get dailies for talking in chat. You get achievements and rewards for joining a guild, playing with friends, doing anything together. There is a currency called friendship points, for crying out loud. And you can use that to get cosmetics and emotes. It is an anti-social MMO. You can technically play it solo. The story is solo. Most of the dungeons have a solo mode, but the game will almost kind of pressure you into being a social lighthouse. It's almost kind of funny. But you end up with a vibrant community, and that's honestly really healthy for the game. MMOs need to be cultural and societal facilitators, and the devs are doing a pretty good job on that front. On that note, it may paint the game as a casual MMO, and that would be kinda right. But it's also a hardcore game. It's both. The game is as casual or as hardcore as you'd like it to be. It just depends on what you want out of it, really. Do you want to relax, RP, socialize, gather, craft, maybe tackle some easy content, occasionally farm world bosses? Or do you want to be sweaty and clear all the floors on the Stimmen vaults, or raid, or do master mode dungeons? You have choices. I think the game does a good job in covering for every core player, for casuals, midcore, hardcore. Moving on. The open world. Again, I've pretty much glazed that in another video. If you want, check that out. But to summarize, the open world design is good, at least for a couple of zones. Asteria Plains and Windhowl Canyon are both examples of really well-designed zones. Asteria Plains feels large, expansive, mountainous in some areas, sky islands to explore. Windhowl Canyon has some verticality to its design too. You can climb by taking advantage of wind currents and using your flying and glide powers. These two zones make very good use of your parkour abilities. Combine all that with chests and bosses scattered throughout the map, and you have a very video gamey feeling world. It feels very platforming. Think Mario. If Mario could jump 5 times and run up walls like a freaking ninja. If Mario could also be like your anime waifu or your anime husbando. It feels really good to move around and explore. It might lose its novelty after a while, but that all depends on what zones we see in the future. And I do hope they're good, because some zones feel very lackluster and minuscule compared to the bigger ones. Zones like Dusk Dye Woods or whatever, something, I forgot the name. Those feel like old classic Japanese MMO design levels, dude. Think Dream of Mirror Online, that kind of level design. If anyone is old enough to remember that game, that is. It's possible these smaller zones are just to house more world bosses, but I just much prefer the bigger ones. So it's kind of a mixed bag. My initial impressions on the open world are very strong, and then they sort of teeter off a bit when more and more of the smaller zones unlock. I hope that is not an indicator for what the newer zones in the future are going to be like, because the smaller zones are not interesting. Asteria and Windhowl are definitely my favorites. I want to see more of that. Daily quests and activities are really nice and fairly quick to get done. They vary from basic escort quests to defeating enemies, doing fun mini-games, jump puzzles, stuff like that. But do them enough times and it might get old after a few weeks of that. Hope they add more variety, because I do actually like some of these. They're pretty nice casual fun. PvP, or the lack thereof. Honestly, there being no PvP in the game is not an issue at all. In fact, this might sound controversial, but I'm glad that there is no PvP in this game. It's not necessarily because I don't like PvP. It's because, well, for 2 reasons. One, I think this will allow the developers to just focus on refining the PvE portions of the game. None of this segmenting the team into focusing different aspects, trying to satisfy many different groups of players. Honestly, if you want a PvP game, then there are other games, my dudes. You can play other games. Go play your MOBAs, go play your fighting games, your FPSs. You have other options. I think historically, MMOs have never had good PvP. Never. And I've played quite a few. WoW PvP, Final Fantasy XIV PvP, Guild Wars 2 PvP. It's all bad. It does not bother me in the slightest. If you're bored with the game after catching up with endgame content and you have nothing else to do, then maybe that's a sign that you should probably take a break and try something else. Just a thought. Now, for the big elephant in the room. The one aspect of this game that some people are reluctant to comment on, and that's the aggressive monetization of this game. It's free to play. What is free-to-play? Free-to-play is cash shops, battle passes, super duper battle passes, monthly passes, gotcha. It has all of it, and that will definitely color your perception of this game. This is the state of newer MMOs, and unfortunately, this is how they can survive in the current ecosystem of live service gaming. Everything is vying for people's attention, and the best way to make it easy for people to try out your live service game is to lower the barrier to entry. But also, in order for an MMO to survive and fund content, you have to resort to some aggressive monetization practices to entice those that have money. This is where the whales come in. The Imagine Gacha is probably the most contentious point people have with this game. Imagines are basically equipable summons with active abilities and passives. Think of the trinkets from World of Warcraft or the relics from Guild Wars 2. There are good free-to-play friendly options available, but the strongest ones, of course, can be swiped for, with enough money, through the gacha. Now, technically, any player can get these if they save enough of the freebies, or if they get lucky. Otherwise, these premier Imagines are going to take weeks, if not months, to procure, without swiping an irresponsible amount of money. You know who you are. They're not game-breaking must-haves, but some of these are pretty strong. For example, Irona's Imagine lets you res up to 4 other people in the party. That would be extremely valuable for endgame content. This system is likely going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, especially for those who are sweaty players that don't have money, chasing the biggest numbers they can achieve. If you're a casual or mid-core player, these are less valuable to you. But the Imagine Gacha remains as a red flag for many. As for the cosmetic gacha and other cosmetic items, they're not too bad. Whales or people who really want to make a lot of Luno can put those items on the auction house or trading center for the free-to-players to buy with their Luno. Just be ready to play the auction house because you'll need tons of Luno. What else is there? Time gating content. That's kind of a thing. It is only present for the first couple of weeks, and it bars story, dungeons, features from being accessed. More and more are unlocked on a daily basis, and by the time it is all unlocked, all newer players will not have to worry about the time gating anymore. So if you'd rather wait and have access to everything, you could wait a couple of weeks. Otherwise, you are all experiencing the same content together for the first few days, at the same time. Some feel like that's a good thing. Some dislike that. I am on the side of not liking time gating. Although it is a less egregious form of time gating, I still prefer to tackle content at my own pace, man. Not at a pace the game devs dictate for me, but it's not a big deal. Just a small gripe I have. And the last criticism I have, finally, is the story. I did my best to follow all of it, and oh boy, I'm not gonna lie, it is painfully mid. So far anyway. Now it's not completely bad, and I still have hope for the story in the future, but as of right now, it is very basic and generic. Not very compelling. Easily forgettable A-plot. What I can say is good, however, is the B-plot stuff. Some background lore and how things magically work are kind of intriguing, and small character moments you have with Tina, Irona, and others. The slice of life stuff, the comedy, the endearing nature and vibes of certain scenarios are actually kind of fun. During those moments, it felt like I was watching a no-stakes, slice-of-life, feel-good adventure anime. But when the main story comes around, and it's time for the serious stuff, it is kind of a snoozeville. Like watching any other generic isekai that gets mass-manufactured these days. Now that may sound harsh, but here's why I have some hope. This is just how it is with every MMO, dude. Not a single MMO has a good story from the beginning. Not a single one. And I think it's because the devs are more focused on trying to get their game functional out of the gate, which is understandable. Story is probably the least of their concerns right now, and I am willing to forgive them for that, if they can deliver a better story later. It also didn't help that the localization and translation was spotty in some parts. Hopefully that gets better too. But hey, at least we have Rorola. There is a lack of English VA voice acting, And that will also be a huge factor for people not picking up the story. Despite the game being full of the anime community who prefer subs over dubs, I'm not going to get into that. There will still be people who do actually want English VA. Not a deal breaker for me. I will continue to absorb the story by reading subs, but hopefully in the future they can afford the VA. I, for one, am absolutely fine with dubs, just for the record. So that's pretty much most of what I got to say about the game. Despite my concerns and my criticisms, I still have plenty of praise for Blue Protocol. It may not hit all the notes for some people, but it still hits the right notes for me. I'm still very much looking forward to playing the game. This is something that I've been looking forward to for many years, for like well over a decade. I've always wanted an anime MMO, a decent one at least. With all that said, this game has a long road ahead of it. And I believe in them. I believe in the devs. They can totally make this work. I have faith. Hopefully, this brought you some valuable perspective. I wasn't able to check out everything as easily as I could have wanted. Checking out master modes, raids, endgame stuff is going to take me personally a lot more time to experience and engage with. I would have loved to go more in depth with that, but I value my sanity. I had to take some breaks so I don't burn out, and I will likely still pace myself as I go through the main release of the game. After all, I still want to make some time for my other anime stuff, like my gacha games and my JRPGs. If that's also your jam, consider checking out my channel. I have playthrough VODs, clips, reactions to stuff like Wuthering Waves, Zenless Zone Zero, Final Fantasy, Stellar Blade. I'm just naming a few recent things that I've done. I also stream on both YouTube and Twitch, usually during the evenings in the west coast of America. That is the Pacific time zone. If you want to hang out and vibe, please like, comment, subscribe, help out a small content creator out, and I hope to catch you in the future. Until then, stay safe and be kind to each other, and we'll catch you later.